So as Graciela's asked me to introduce myself, I'll just say that Gaia Foundation has worked with international partners around the world, but particularly with African groups such as the African Biodiversity Network on seed issues. So I'm going to talk about the learning that we've had with our partners over mostly the last decade around seed and reviving seed diversity. And we've had a lot of bad news, and I'll set the context a bit about why we're in such a bad position regarding seeds. But also there's a lot of good and exciting stuff out there that I'm really, really excited to share with you. But just to remember where we are and how we got to this position as humanity today, for the last 10,000 years, it is because farmers have been selecting, breeding, saving, nurturing, celebrating seed, that we have such incredible diversity of seed, and that farmers have been the ones to develop this diversity of seeds over the last 10,000 years. And adapted to different soils, different climates, different continents, different weather systems, different nutritional needs, different seasons. There is such an incredible, or has been such an incredible wealth of seed diversity precisely because of the role of farmers. And seed and humanity are so intrinsically linked. But we now find ourselves, for the first time ever in the history of humanity, where instead of seed diversity increasing, we're now finding that seed diversity has dramatically decreased in the last few decades. Like 75% of seed diversity has been lost in the last few decades. And this is because of some of the policies that we've referred to here earlier this morning or this afternoon, such as the Green Revolution, the industrialization of agriculture, UPOV laws, which require seed registration, requirements for distinctiveness, uniformity, stability, all sorts of things like supermarkets making certain requirements, export focus. All of this has really, really narrowed down the world's genetic diversity. And we find ourselves actually at a little bit of when we look at the situation today and in the future, we realize that this is actually very, very serious, because especially I think in the context of climate change, where farmers in Africa and Europe and all around the world are not just finding that they can predict how climate is going to change and what challenges they're going to face, but not only year to year, but month to month, day to day, they don't know whether they're going to be dealing with less rain, more rain, floods, lower temperatures, higher temperatures, droughts, pests, diseases. All of these new challenges, any of these could happen day to day, month to month. And so what we find is that where farmers are growing, single breeds of seed, that's actually now more like putting all your eggs in one basket and creating more risk than ever. What we actually see in terms of the need to develop real strategies for agriculture, for adaptation, growing seed diversity really needs to be talked about as part of the solution for agriculture, and strategies to really revive that seed diversity need to be considered very carefully. Now, let's remember that seed diversity has been developed precisely because farmers have had the knowledge and the control over their seed and been the ones to develop it to adapt to their needs. But as seed systems and industrialization of agriculture has occurred, this has disappeared. So how do we begin to revive this seed diversity, in a way that really works for farmers on the ground? And I wanted to share some stories that we've worked with communities in Africa that have been really trying to address this. So, and trying to really put not just seed diversity, but also what's really key is the knowledge about seed, and making sure that's really in farmers' hands, and alive and growing and building, and for farmers to move from no longer being customers of seed and fertilizers, but actually being knowledge holders, knowledge sharers. So one of a couple of the practices that Gaia and ABN have been working with in Africa have been involving really looking at who holds this traditional knowledge about seed and who's still using the old forgotten seed diversity. And that usually tends to be the elders in a community. Because as modern farming practices have come in, it tends to be that these are seen as more modern and the old ways are seen as perhaps unchristian, perhaps backwards. So where these traditional practices are being used, it's often in secret by elders, often by women, grandmothers especially, sort of quietly doing this, often because they don't even have the money to buy the fertilizers and the seed. But so the process is about rebuilding trust with communities and finding a way to help those communities and those members of the communities to feel that they can talk about their knowledge and practice and seed without being looked down upon. So what, for example, one of our partners did in Kenya was to go to, one of our partners went back to his community and talked to the elders, and got the elders in the same space where they could talk to each other without being judged by the younger generation. And gradually, slowly, that conversation about their knowledge, about their seed, about their spiritual and cultural practices as well, relating to their ecological knowledge and their local ecosystem and territory, started to emerge. And then the younger generation started to go, what are you doing? And they would, and because the cultural dynamic in the community had shifted so much, because the elders were no longer respected because they were seen as old and backwards, the elders went, this is not for you. And then they carried on their conversation, and then eventually when the youth or the younger generation were like, please tell us what you're doing, when they felt the dynamic was right enough, they started to say, okay, we'll tell you, but if you listen very carefully and respectfully. And that opened up an amazing space for the whole community to talk about the kind of seed that they used to grow, how they used to deal with drought, why they had the seed that was resilient to different weather problems and pests and diseases, and how, now that the rains aren't coming regularly, these modern hybrid seeds don't work as well if they don't have perfect rainfall and access to fertilizers. So this really started to get the whole community interested in what they might do to revive, and it turned out that the grandmothers especially were the ones that had been reviving or quietly growing a lot of the seed diversity. So the process was, what are you telling me here? The process was about creating a space for them to multiply those seeds and for the rest of the community to start growing them as well. And so that village, Kamburu, in the space of 18 months, while the rest of Kenya was experiencing 2 years of drought, actually became food secure. And they actually had a surplus which they then started to sell to their neighbouring villages. So then other alpha methodologies that they've used include stuff like eco-mapping, so getting the elders and the members of the community together to look at their territory and draw together a map of the territory and really name, where is it that the bees have their honey, and where is it that that plant grows really well, and where is it that's prone to erosion, and really drawing a beautiful map together, a map of the present, but also a map of the past, as well as a map of the future, so they can really see the trajectory of change that they've been on, as well as the one that they want to rebuild. And that's been really an amazing strategy to get the youth to understand the complexity of ecological knowledge that their elders used to have about their environment, and to want to take that knowledge into their own understanding of agriculture as well. And then another really amazing process that they use is called Ecocultural Calendars. So if you consider the amount of knowledge, I think this is what's really missing from a lot of the talk about agriculture in Africa. A lot of the excuse for development in Africa assumes that there is no knowledge there, that these farming systems are completely, useless and empty, and that farmers don't know what they're doing. But there's an incredible wealth of knowledge, but it's just so subtle and complex that perhaps international researchers or development people can't actually see it or understand it. But these ecocultural calendars, what they do is they look at a lot of the different crops and seeds and biodiversity that is used, and look at what happens to it throughout the year in the cycle. And then they draw like a concentric diagram around the year. So while one crop is germinating, another one is being stored at this time. Maybe this plant is budding. Maybe the stars are in a particular constellation, and the rains come at that time, and the insects come at another time. And so, you know, this way, the younger farmers start to learn that complex ecological knowledge again, start to read that landscape, understand what's happening. Then they don't need to rely on the fertilizers and the pesticides and the irrigation perhaps so much, because they're really understanding what's going on with the land that they and the resources that they actually have. So, okay. And what's really emerging is that no one person has all of the knowledge, so these processes really help everybody in the community to pool their collected knowledge and build a really full, clear picture of what's happening. And what this is, I'm going to speed up now. And what's really emerged here is that women in particular have a very special role, because while men have often been targeted for promoting agribusiness, for yield, for sale, for cash crops, is the women who grow crops domestically for eating in the home. And so they select and breed seeds for lots of different other reasons, which are completely ignored by agribusiness. So it might be how well it stores, you know, whether it's vulnerable to mold or pests, also how long it takes to cook, how much water it needs to cook, how it tastes, what the nutrition is, you know, all of these different things. These are, you know, these reasons are the reasons why we have seed diversity in the world, to meet all these needs, which have been completely ignored in recent decades. So, actually, Gaia's come out, or going to soon come out with another report done in collaboration with the African Women's Development Fund, looking specifically at women's knowledge in agriculture. And I think it's going to contribute a lot to the discussion about women in agriculture. And I'll also just speedily refer to, first of all, this film, Seeds of Freedom, which some of you have seen, which was about the impact of about how seed has changed and industrialization of seed has developed, and what the GM threat is, but also, you know, the origins of seed diversity. And this one, Seeds of Sovereignty, which looks in more detail about some of these approaches that I've referred to just today. And I think that you'll really enjoy them, because they're absolutely gorgeous films. So let's just remember that 75% of global seed diversity has disappeared in recent decades, and I really think that if we and the next generations are going to have any chance to farm and eat, we really need to prioritise seed diversity now and for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa, for that. Just to remember that seed is not a commodity. It's a cultural food and cultural good.